Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Mormon Atheist. So today I want to talk about another book. Today is August 2nd, 2025, and I want to talk about hang on one second here, folks. All right, so I want to talk about today's August 2nd, 2025, and I want to talk about a book by a guy named Daniel Rupp, R-U-P-P, okay? Now, so the thing with this book is these are lost Joseph Smith own word writings. These are his papers, apostates. So I want to welcome everybody to the congregation. Welcome, apostates. Like and subscribe if you haven't already to the channel. Today we're talking about another book. All of our episodes are books on how Mormonism, the world history and the church history, the cultic history are very separate things. They're two different things, right? And so what we do on this channel is we go back to the world history and we look at that and we compare the notes to the church history and we see the differences. We are specifically looking for the differences in these things. So okay, so the title of this book is a very long title. Okay, the name of the book is the name of the book is An Original History of the Religious Dominations at Present Existing in the United States, containing authentic accounts of their rise, progress, statistics, and doctrine. Okay. And this came out in 1844. Now, it's not clear if this came out before or after Joseph's death, okay, because there is no scholarship on this book at all. At all. There's no scholarship. Everything that I looked up, maybe apostates, you can find something different, but everything that I looked up just says refer to BYU studies or the Joseph Smith papers. So I went to the Joseph Smith papers and I looked it up, and lo and behold, there's a copy of this book. But here's the thing with it. It's edited. It says right on the Joseph Smith paper website, it says edited. So, but then you go and you read it. If you go to archive.org and you look it up and you read it, it's very different. You know, it's different, okay? And so that's kind of the entire purpose of this channel is these things are different, okay? And that's what we point out is these differences, right? So we're going to kind of compare, we're going to look at Joseph Smith's first vision story tonight. Okay, that's what we're looking at. And we're going to compare it to his own version, right? You got to remember, this particular version was published in 1844 that I'm going to talk about right now. You got to stay with me, folks, because this stuff gets complicated and it gets intertwined. Okay, this is the Mormon hoax, right? This is what they do, is they just complicate everything, but let's try to figure it out. So Joseph, so this is a letter, okay, that Daniel Rupp corresponded with Joseph Smith, and he asked Joseph Smith to, just give him a summary of the Latter-day Saints. And so the name of this letter, okay, that he replies back to Daniel Rupp, right? It's in the book. It's pages 404 to 410. And the name of that letter is simply Latter-day Saints. That's it. Okay. There's no hyphen. There's no Jesus Christ. There's no church of. It's just Latter-day Saints by Joseph Smith, it says. Okay. So he himself approved this letter, but there's a caveat to this letter that I'm going to get to in a second. Okay. Joseph Smith approved this letter. So Daniel Rupp in the preface, because I always talk about the prefaces, right? You got to read the preface to know the intent of the author, right? So he says that he was going around for 2 years prior to the publication of the book. Okay, so 2 years prior, this comes out in 44, so we're going to think 42-ish era time frame. Okay, so Joseph Smith has a previous version that comes out in 32. That's his original version of his first vision story comes out in 1832. That's the first written down account, right? And that's in his own diary, right? So it's the Joseph Smith diary, right? Okay, that's significant because there's things in that version, right? Okay, this letter in 44 is word for word identical of what comes out in the we'll get there, right? In the times and seasons, right? It's the times and seasons, the 42 version, right? The that Joe it's called the Wentworth letter, right? The Wentworth letter, okay, that Joseph wrote to the times and seasons in 1842. This letter in 44 that he's writing to Daniel Roop is word for word identical, Roop says, right? Okay, so that's important because we're going to get down to some of the stuff. The critics argue, right, that this retelling of the 44 version of the first vision, right, in Daniel Roop's book is the sanitized version, right? It's the version that they're putting out to the people, because Roop has nothing to do with Mormonism or he's just a historian going around writing down he's logging all the different religious dominations. I mean, it's in the title of the book. So that's what he's doing, right? So he has no skin in this game, right? And so this is a new audience. This is considered a new audience. Has other books, right? And so this is a new audience for Joseph. So he writes the watered down version, okay, is what this letter is, right? Okay, now you can read these letters and you can very much get that impression, okay? So they're omitting a lot of the details, right? That's preserved in the earlier accounts, in the more personal accounts, right? We'll get to some examples here in a second. Okay, this is important later, because this is kind of what this entire episode is about, is this piece right here. What the critics are arguing, this retelling is a sanitized version, omitting many details preserved in earlier personal accounts. Okay, we'll get there. Hang with me, apostates. Okay, so here's the version in Roop's book. Okay, when I was about 14, okay, that's important, right? Because everything else after that, all of the versions after that, you got to remember, this is the version that is closely related to Joseph's own story, is this version, okay? And this is the 44 version. When I was about 14, I saw two glorious personages surrounded within a brilliant light. They told me all religious doctrines, all religious denominations were believing in inaccurate doctrines. I was expressly commanded to go not after them, receiving a promise that the fullness of the gospel should at some future time be made known unto me. Now that is on page 404 to 405 in Roop's book. Okay. Key points noticeably missing from this version, right? Any mention of personal sin, right? You have to remember what Joseph's original version is, okay? The 32 version, right? Forgiveness is out of this version. emotional struggles, the emotional struggles that he's going through, right? And we're going to get to examples of this here in a minute, right? There's no revival context in that version, right? So right off the get-go, you'll notice the age, 14, and everything else, he's 16, right? Okay. So now let's get to the 32 version, right? This is the autobiographical version, okay? And all of the stuff that I just said is omitted, you're going to see in this section right here. This is in the Joseph Smith autobiography. My mind became exceedingly distressed. I cried unto the Lord for mercy, a pillar of light. I saw the Lord, saying, Joseph, my son, thy sins are forgiven thee. Okay, remember the 44 section, right? Okay, noticeably missing in the 44 section was the forgiveness, the emotional struggle, right? I became exceedingly distressed, right? He's struggling, right? Okay, so you have to, okay, so the key points in this section is there's only one personage, right? In the first one, there's two. I saw two glorious personages, okay? In Joseph's version, there's one personages, okay? There's emphasis on the sin in Joseph's versions, right? The sins are forgiven, right? And of course, forgiveness. That's in Joseph's version, the 32 version. Okay. Okay. Here's where things get interesting, apostate congregation. Like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Okay, so now we're going to get into the Pratt account. This is where the story changes, right? Okay, so this is two glorious personages who exactly resemble each other. His sins were forgiven. I have saw many angels in this vision. That's the 1835 Pratt account. Okay. Key takeaways in that. This one, now there's angels in the vision. This is the first time angels come in. There's explicit forgiveness. Okay. His sins were forgiven. Okay, this completely is different than Root's version, right? And it's also different than Joseph's own version, okay? So now let's get into the 1838 official church account. This is the official church account of Joseph's first vision, okay? And this is found in the Pearl of Great Price. So again, there's two personages. This time, one of them speaks. One of the personages speak. And he says, this is my beloved son, hear him. Told me none of them was acknowledged of God as his church and kingdom. Okay. Now there's two personages and one speaks. This is the official church version, right? There's only one in Joseph's. He never speaks. Okay. And you have to, when you compare these, this one focuses, this version, right, the 38 version, right, it focuses completely on institutional apostasy, okay? And the reconstruction of the church, right? So when you go side by side with these, right, when you talk to these side by side, you have the 32 version, the 35, 38, and 44, okay? So the first two, the 32 and the 35, there's forgiveness, right? Only in the first 32 version, there's only one being, one. Everything else, there's two, right? Two defined personages, two personages only, right? In 38, the personages are divine. In 44, it's just two personages. They're not divine. There's no divinity, right? Okay. And so, you can compare these side by side, right? And that they didn't even go with Joseph's own story, apostates. Do you understand that? Joseph's story was the first, it was the first vision. One personages, forgiveness, forgiveness of sins, all these other kinds of things. And the official church version in 38 is the Pratt account. So they took the Pratt account, and that is the story they were running with the Joseph Smith first vision story. It wasn't even Joseph Smith's own story. Okay, apostates. I want to stop here and I want to ask you a question, apostate congregation. How many of you have ever started anything or ever done something or anything? It doesn't matter. You start mowing the yard, you start painting the house, fixing the car, cleaning the bathroom, washing it, whatever, it doesn't matter. Okay? Building a house, you name it. And somebody takes that away from you and says it's their own. What does that do to you? What kind of a mental state does that put you into? Right? You want to fight for your, hey, that's mine, right? Like, do you know what I mean? Do you understand? So why, apostates? Would Joseph Smith allow this to happen? If he was such a tyrant, he was such a beast, they're stealing his story right in front of his face while he's still alive. Do you understand that? In 38 and in 42? In 38, it's the church's official story, apostates. And it's not Joseph's original story. Do you understand that? Does that make you question, right? It should. Because if you go into the Book of Mormon today, right, and you read it today, it's a hodgepodge of all these stories. You can read all these stories because they're so different that they stand out. They stand out from each other. They're so different from each other. Okay, the Orson Pratt story and the Parley Pratt story and the Orson Hyde story, and there's ones that I didn't even compare in this because they're so different. And you go back to the original Joseph 1832 story. I mean, that's the original story. That's the first story in print, is that story. Okay? And it's in Joseph's own diary. It's supposedly Joseph's own diary. These are things why in my previous videos, I ask if this guy is even a real, like, I think he's a real person. Don't get me wrong, he's a real, but I don't think he's that guy. Do you know what I'm saying? Because why would you let the foundation of that's the foundational story, is the first vision, right? That's what creates the Book of Mormon. He's told that these things are going to come, right? This miraculous work is going to come. Okay, so let's keep going. They didn't even take Joseph's story. The inconsistence, the most obvious thing here is just the revolving story, right? The revolving story of how these things change, and just LDS history in general, right? How over time, when you read all these books, apostates, because I literally every single episode is a new book. Somebody said to me the other day, I don't think there's 200 books written in the 1800s about Mormonism. BS. There's hundreds. Pamphlets, articles. You have to look for them, right? Watch my channel, and we go through these things and we talk about all these articles, all these pamphlets, all these This is what we talk about on this channel. The appearance of angels, right? That's another inconsistency, right? There's no angels in Joseph's first vision. There are no angels, right? Okay, he just says a personage, a personage is what he says, right? Forgiveness in the first vision is mostly gone in all of the rest of the vision stories, right? Okay, the number and identity of the divine beings, right? It all starts with one, and there he's not divine, he's a person appeared to me, right? And he was the Lord, okay? But he does not say divine, divinity, right? Things like that. That word appears later, okay? This is crazy, apostates. When you compare these stories, right? And this is what I wanted, this is kind of the point of this episode is I mostly talk about other things, William Morgan, Freemasonry, the Church of Masonry, how the Church of Christ facilitated the Masons in the murder of William Morgan, okay? And the Church of Christ was Joseph Smith's original church, okay? And so that's mainly what I focus on. And the Solomonic magic of the craft in Freemasonry, right? But we read all of these books that are, I stay as close to Joseph Smith as I can. So I'm reading the original sources, right? When you talk about apologetics, right? So I looked up scholarship for this book and I couldn't find any. I could not find it. Nothing. Nothing. This is a 7-page letter, apostate congregation. Nobody's ever heard of this letter. You are the first. Okay? I don't know how else to say that. Okay? Nobody's ever heard of this book. Nobody's ever heard of this letter. Nobody's ever heard of it. There's no scholarship. Unless you can find something, everything that I found says just go to BYU Studies, refer to BYU Studies, refer to the Joseph Smith papers. There's no individual papers written on this book, peer-reviewed papers, none that I could find, okay? Because I would very much like to read what they're saying about this. And I don't know, so no one wrote about this. It's so an apologetic argument is nobody has ever written about the first vision before the BOM, right? Before the account that was written in the Book of Mormon, right? Well, that's BS because there's every book I've ever read has the first vision story in it. Every single one of them. So that argument is just dead on its face. You cannot use that argument, apologists, because it's just blatantly false. And we talk about all of these books on my channel, every single one of those books that we talk about has a story of the first vision. And when you read these stories and they all are the same, they all match, they all are telling you the same story, and they're all giving you these reference quotes to different this and that and the other, and it's all the same and it all matches. And then you have the church's story, which is very, very different, very different. So apostates, who do you believe, right? Do you believe the cult that's giving you cult information that says only believe what the cult says? Or do you believe what the townsfolk are saying, the people are saying, the Congress people, because everybody, this is a movement, apostate congregations, you understand that? Everybody knows about the Mormons. They're causing havoc everywhere. They're causing chaos in 4 different states: Illinois, Ohio, Missouri, and New York. Everybody knows about the Mormons. They're a complete nuisance to the United States at that time. Everybody's writing about them. So you can't say that nobody knows these stories. The significance with Roop's book is the first outside print that was approved Mormon material, right? That was not in the Times and Seasons or the Messenger Advocate or, some kind of a Mormon publication, right? In 1844, the Joseph Smith's own writings. This is his own writings, apostates, that nobody's ever heard of. Nobody. It's stunning to me, right? And it's groundbreaking because Joseph dies later that year. So again, it's not clear if this comes out before or after Joseph's death, but either way, it's the same year, right? And it's the first approved LDS material for outside print to recruit new members. That's the purpose of this. Okay, I want to be very clear of that. Roof's entire book, that is the purpose of his entire book. So all of the denominations that he talks about, every one of them, either the current prophet, prophetess, whatever, writes a letter to Roof, and then he prints that letter in this book, right? And each letter is a little synopsis of their religious denomination, right? And it's actually a really good book. I'm fascinated by religion. I don't believe in religion, but all of the old 1800s and 1700s and all of these kinds of things, that religions that aren't even around anymore, that have morphed into other things. I mean, it's all fascinating to me, And so when you study, apostates, I got to be honest. I have to be frank with you here. I got to be honest, apostate congregation. I've been studying the community of Christ, the RFLDS. No. That's a lie. What is it called? Yeah, the community of Christ, the Reformed, whatever the name of it is. All right. Anyways, the branch off. I've been studying that, right? And so all of the stuff that they practice, that they believe in, and they preach in today's world is literally the same thing Joseph Smith was preaching in his early days, right? And then it morphs. It starts changing. There is no polygamy, right? The reorganized church, they don't practice polygamy. They openly say Joseph was not a polygamist, all of this kind of stuff. But if you look at their doctrines and their teachings and their sayings and their beliefs and like that kind of stuff, it is so closely more related to Joseph Smith's early days than today's LDS church could ever possibly. It's not even close. The differences are so incredibly vast that it's not even close. So I would say this is where my frankness comes in. If you really want to believe in Joseph Smith, if you're a believer and you want to believe in the guy, hey, no fault, whatever. Yeah, I think you're a little crazy, but if you're wanting to go that route, you should really look at the reorganized LDS church, or the Church of Christ at Temple Lot. That specifically that Church of Christ, okay, that branch off, okay, because the Brighamite LDS church has nothing at all to do, because polygamy has to be true. You see, some things have to be true, or your lie doesn't work anymore, right? So in order for the Brighamite LDS church to work, Joseph has to be a polygamist. It has to be true. It has to, right? So there are some things that just have to be true, or you're dead in the water. You're dead in the water, right? And polygamy is one of those issues. It has to be true, or you're dead in the water. Because as an ex-LDS member, or as an however it is you want to look at it, right? I'm an apostate. Okay, I was born and raised in the cult. I know these stories. Okay, I know how this goes. Okay, so all right. Anyways, I'm going off. I'm getting off track. Let's get back to the book. All right. So in conclusion, okay, we're almost done here. I got we're about 30 minutes in. That's perfect. I'm trying to shorten down the times. So in conclusion here, if this is genuine, why would the accounts vary in such fundamental ways, apostates? In very fundamental ways. These first vision accounts are very different. Okay, 1832 describes repentance and mercy. 1838 serves as an institutional narrative, foundational to the church restruction, right? It's crazy how this stuff evolves, and it goes to fit and suit whatever needs are taking place at the time to evolve the church's story, right? It not their message, their story, because they get put in these pigeonholes, and now they have to answer. They got to come up with something, and these are the answers, right? Okay. And then somebody writes it down. Now it sticks. It's stuck. Now you forever are married to that answer. And that's what's happening here, right? Okay, so Roof's book was shaped for an outside audience, new recruits. It takes out the personal struggle, it takes out the theology. Okay, this is deliberately tailored for new Mormon recruits. This passage in this book is, right? So if the foundational vision, this is a question that I'm asking you, apostates. Okay, maybe not even the apostate. I think I'd have to go with the TBMs. I'm going to ask the TBMs this. TBMs, if the foundational vision narrative cannot reliably be documented, what confidence does one have in the doctrines built upon it? Okay, think about that for a minute. Let that sink in. Okay, the lie. Okay, your doctrines are built on a lie. So then what good are your doctrines? Do you understand that? I'm not trying to be a hard or anything. I'm just, logic, reason, right? Think about that for a minute, right? So why were earlier versions suppressed or delayed in the circulation? Because a lot of this stuff, the church itself suppresses. This is the cultic move, guys. This is what the cults does, or the cults do, right? Is they tell you what they want you to read. Church approved material, cult approved material. Think in terms of a cult, right? What is an LDS bookstore, apostate congregation? It's in the name. It's in the freaking name. LDS bookstore. So anything that's sold in that bookstore, do you understand? Okay. All right. So does the strategic presentation of the vision in 1844 represent historical honesty, TBMs? Okay. Or revisionist myth making? That's a hard pill to swallow right there, TBMs. Okay, so my references for this are Daniel Roof's book. Okay, you can look it up, and it's page 404 to 410 is specifically what I'm talking about on this presentation. Okay, uh, Joseph Smith's diary. Okay, 1832, his own account of the first vision. The Pratt section, the Times and Season Wentworth letter, Roop's book, and again, 1835, the Pratt again, right? The present day Book of Mormon is a hodgepodge of all of these stories, okay? And so it's really fascinating to me, apostate congregation, how even ex-Mormons, I have conversations today with podcasters, ex-Mormon podcasters, and they flatly deny this stuff. There's no way. Maybe they meant. Maybe they changed their names. Maybe they got the dates wrong. Maybe this. They could have meant that. Because some things have to be true. If they're not true, you fall apart. Okay? Mormonism is that fragile. All you have to do is go read the books I talk about. Go read them. And the last like 4 episodes I've done, those books are only 50 pages long, people. And you will see for yourself. You will literally see for yourself the evolution of the Mormon story, of the LDS story. And by the time you get to the 1870s, people are literally calling out, like, how do you not even know what your prophet looks like? These are people that were in jail cells with Joseph Smith, that were on the road, that served missions, that, you know, these were intimate people, and they cannot describe Joseph Smith. The church's own version of the first vision is not even Joseph Smith's own version. The official church version is not Joseph Smith's own original version. So what are they doing to this guy? What's going on here? Why are they hijacking? I almost feel bad for Joseph Smith, to be honest with you. Because the Brighamites really kind of hijacked this guy, like completely hijack him. They hijack his story. They hijack his wives. They take his religion. They most likely, Brigham Young, I think, is the one that killed the guy because he wanted power. He was tired of the shenanigans. He was just done with the Joseph Smith story. He was done with the story, and it was time to move on. And they were becoming more institutionalized. They were becoming more together. Does that make sense? And Joseph Smith was all over the place. He was a whore. He's not a polygamist. He's a whore. There's a difference, okay, between being a whore and a polygamist. Okay, being a whore is not polygamy. Okay, celestial marriage is not polygamy. The Book of Commandments. Okay, there is no polygamy in the Book of Commandments. The Church of Christ, Book of Commandments, Joseph Smith's original church. There is no polygamy in that. In these old books, there's no polygamy. They talk about celestial marriage, absolutely, because that is the revelation, not polygamy. Celestial marriage, as described, is when somebody dies. Think baptism of the dead, right? When somebody dies, they didn't have a chance to get married to a righteous Mormon. So we're going to baptize them and be married to them celestially. That's what all this stuff is talking about. The polygamy does not come until Brighamites. And all these books actually talk about how Brigham Young himself produces these papers that are backdated with, I think William Dixon calls it a cockamamie bull story. Yeah, so like it's in these books, apostates, TBMs. When you go to the LDS bookstore and you get a book on the Mountain Meadow Massacre or something else, right? Whatever the case, the first vision, right? All of those scholars, if you go to BYU and you listen to the LDS scholarship, what a freaking joke that is, right? LDS scholarship. Okay, Mormon historians, what a clown show. Okay, all these people are doing is reading these books, and then they're giving you their faithful opinion on this book, okay, or these books, whatever, okay, because you can read the scholarship on most of the stuff that I talk about. You can Google it and you can look it up and you can read the LDS scholarship. And if you actually read the book and then read what the scholars are writing and the Mormon historians and all, you're just scratching your head like, what the F are these people talking about? Because that is not at all what that book says. I mean, I don't get it. I don't understand apostates. I truly do not understand this. This is a thing that's going on in my brain of how can these people twist and this story so dramatically, because it's all in these old books. You got to remember, apostates, I stay as close to Joseph Smith as I can. The 1800s, the late 1700s to when he dies. And then I do not go into the 1900s at all. I stay in the 1800s as close to him as I can. And I'm reading these books and I'm bringing them to you. And you can look them up. You can look all of them up and you can read them for yourself and you can see. And you're going to find other stuff. You're going to find a lot of other stuff. Mountain Meadow Massacre, First Vision, Freemasonry, Solomonic magic. Like you're going to find so much stuff. So much stuff. Just the common history of life in general in Utah in the early days. Like just the early America, right? Just history, you know, it stopped at the Missouri River in the early days, right? The United States did not go past the Missouri River in the early days, right? And so you read about all that kind of stuff, right? You read about the anti-Masonic movement, women's rights, slavery. All of this is intertwined in the Mormon movement. All of it is, because it's what's happening at the time. Okay, you know, the Indian Wars, like there is so much in these books and they're just fascinating. They're so fascinating. I can't get enough of them. But content warning, people, these books are written, a lot of them that I talk about are pre-Civil War books. They're pre-women's rights books, right? Okay, so take that for what you will, okay? And they're brutal. Like they are brutal. Some of the descriptions of what people do to each other, and it's brutal. Some of the descriptions. So prepare yourself. They're fascinating. They're a fascinating glimpse into the continental North America in the 1800s. Okay, apostates, that concludes my presentation here today. I want to bring you again stuff that just goes to show you that there's literally so many different rabbit holes. If you want to go to Dartmouth College, you can go down the Dartmouth College rabbit hole. You can go down the Oneida College rabbit hole. You can go down there because it all relates to Mormonism. All of it does. And in somehow, some shape. You know, a funny thing, I'm going to end with this. I'm going to tell you a story. So today, okay, I'm doing some William Morgan research, and I've never used GPT before until today, okay? And so I asked it a question, and as you know, in my previous videos, in Solomon Southwick's book, he talks about how Smith from Vermont is the killer of Morgan. So I said, hey, Chat GPT, tell me more about this Smith from Vermont. And it says there's no reference to Smith from Vermont in any anti-Masonic books. And I'm looking at, apostates, I own the freaking book. I did a video on it. I do several videos on this book. Okay. And I'm like, well, this is Chat GPT, right? PT, whatever the fuck, right? So So I'm saying, well, name another book. So I said David Brainerd's book. It specifically says in that book, the church apostates. We just cut out. We're back. Okay. So I was talking to GBT, PT, and I was asking about William Morgan Smith from Vermont, and it said there is no reference in any anti-Masonic book to any person Smith from Vermont. And I says, well, it specifically says on this page, and it replies back, oh, wow, that's an interesting point you make. And so then I started asking it other questions. And it says there is no T.F. Talbot in that book. And I said, on the dedication page, and I took a picture of it and I submitted it, right? And it again says, oh, wow, you make an excellent point. I see where you're going with this. And I kept asking it questions. And the more questions, I could just picture going like this, does not compute, does not compute. Because the questions I was asking it, I literally had to screenshot pictures and submit them of books and page numbers. Or, like I had, and it was, so this stuff is real, apostate congregation. The stuff that I'm talking to you about on my channel is not bullshit. It's real. You just have to look for it, right? And then even Chat GPT, once I started submitting those pictures of the pages, whatever it is that thing does, right? It started like computing this stuff. And I'm like, no shit, here it is, right here, but you got to enter it in there, right? The Church of Christ, the Church of Masonry, Joe Smith, not Joseph, but Joe Smith, J-O, right? And these kinds of things, play with these words when you're looking this stuff up, right? When you're on the newspaper archives, it's never Joseph. It's always Joe Smith. It's never Junior. I've never found a Junior until after he dies, it becomes Junior. But while he's alive, it's always Joe Smith, everything. And you can look up these newspaper archives and you can Google the Church of Christ and Joe Smith, Oliver Cowdery. This stuff comes up, apostates. I have it on my community chats down there. The picture of when Joseph dies in 1834. Yikes. And then he died again in 42. And then he died again in 44. But, apostate congregation, never fear, because every time one of these Josephs die, a new first vision story comes out. Or there's significant changes in the church in these years, 34, 42, 44. Coincidence? I don't know. That's why I'm saying, I'm not saying, I'm asking the question, is this Joseph Smith character even real? Right? Is he even real? Is it just a character, like a persona? Is it somebody? Because in all these books, they call him the imposter. He's an imposter. In those articles that I was telling you about, where he dies in 1834, in 1834 he dies, and they call him Joe Smith, the Mormon prophet, dies, dead, right, is what it says. 42 comes along. They call him the imposter, Joe Smith the imposter. And if you read those articles, the sentiment in those articles are, that's not the guy, right? Joe Smith died in 34. This guy is an imposter. That is not Joseph Smith. That is the sentiment of these articles. And then in 44, the imposter prophet dies. Joe Smith, the Mormon prophet, Joe Smith, the imposter, Joe Smith, the imposter prophet. Because that's not the guy. Joe Smith died in 34. That's what these are saying. So it makes me wonder. I mean, you can take into consideration of however you look at the news today and whatever your opinion, whatever, but it's there. And you can't deny it that it's there because it's there. And so if you look it up, you'll see it. And so this whole thing does not pass my smell test, apostate congregation, is what I'm getting at. Something smells here. I can't tell if Eliza Snow, Parley Pratt, and Orson Hyde are the architects of this entire plot, right? And Brigham Young. Like it started with Joseph and, whatever. Like, I don't even believe that. But something happened. And we ended up with what we have today. And I want to figure out what that is. And through these old books, I'm very slowly getting this picture. But for God's sake, you got to read a lot of them, man. I've read so many of these books, but it's fun. I like it. It's fascinating. I'm a history nerd, so I love history, and I am fascinated by religion. I don't believe in religion at all. Categorically, I do not believe in this stuff. But I'm fascinated with how people can just be so easily guided. This is your salvation, people. This is your ticket to heaven. And you're just going to let some knucklehead tell you, like, hey, I know the answers. Really? Without doing any research or into what you're being told? Because we know just the Bible in general is not what you think it is. Joseph Smith is not who you think he is. The Book of Mormon is not what you think it is. So how can these people give their hard-earned money, discipline their children, live in neighborhoods, voting preferences? How? Somebody else is telling you what to do in your everyday life. That is what fascinates me. How can you let somebody do that? This is your salvation, your ticket to heaven. This is your spirituality. And you're going to let some shyster, some huckster? Oh, but that's not what they mean now. Okay, well, tell me what they mean now. Bergamite. Tell me what they mean now. What do they stand for? They still stand for the same thing. You're letting somebody else tell you how to live your life, how to discipline your children. That right there should hit hard. You're disciplining your children based on what somebody else is telling you and how and what somebody else is telling you how to feel. I mean, is that the most mind-numbing thing you've ever heard? Is for somebody to tell you how to feel? Faith. Just have faith. You got to feel the Spirit. I don't understand that. I do not understand that. I don't get it. I don't get it at all, man. But that's just me, apostate congregation. Like and subscribe to the channel. Sorry for going off like that. I went off on a little tangent there. So anyways, like and subscribe to the channel. If you haven't already, share the videos, all this kind of stuff. The channel's not monetized. It will never be monetized. So the only way that you can support the Mormon Atheist is to subscribe to the channel, share the videos, like all the videos, like all the comments. Even if you don't read the stupid comments, just like them, whatever. I don't care, whatever. Because it helps the algorithms, and not being monetized really, I want this message to get out there. There's another way to look at Mormon history. Get away from the LDS scholars. Anything that has Mormon in their name or LDS in their name, get away from it. That's not real history, apostate congregation. That's cultic history. So subscribe to the channel, share the videos, watch them all the way through. It helps the algorithms. Plus, I talk about a lot of just different crazy stuff in all these videos. Like even though the video has a name, that name does not necessarily represent what's in the video. And I talk about other books and stuff that I reference a lot of stuff in these videos. So, you're bound to get something out of them. So watch them, go back and watch them. You'll see the evolution of me learning, because I'm learning too. I'm learning too. You'll see from video number 1 all the way to today, the evolution of how I am learning and how the apostate congregation has learned with me. I love that. I love that you guys are learning with me and reading these books and commenting what you're finding, commenting on the books you're reading. I love it. I think it's fascinating. It's such a different way to look at Mormon history. Nobody is looking. There is no YouTube channel like this where we look at this stuff like this at all. Nobody. There's not even scholarship, apostates, on the book I just talked about. Do you understand that? You are literally the first person that has heard about this book. And I think the last thing I found was in 1969, somebody did something on this book. That was the last thing I found, was 1969. So since 1969, nothing has been done with this book until now. The Mormon Atheist and You, apostate congregation, so enjoy it. The lost first vision of Joseph Smith as revealed on the Mormon Atheist. Thank you, apostate congregation. Have a nice night, and I hope you subscribe.